To talk about one of the developing issues in this sub-region of the African continent, and that's developments in Niger Republic as the military junta released ousted President Bazoum's wife and son, provisionally, of course, that is, which of course signals some positive developments regarding the ongoing negotiations between the military leadership in Niger Republic and the ECOWAS community by trying to negotiate some sort of return to civilian rule in that country. So what are some of the issues that need to be looked at to understand this particular development, and what does this particular move mean for future negotiations going forward, especially looking at the impact of the ECOWAS sanctions, not just in Niger, but across the sub-region itself. Helping us to navigate some of these developments is Ambassador Haruna Werkani. He is a retired diplomat with the ECOWAS Commission in Abuja. He was also a deputy country chair of the United Nations Economic and Social Council as a strategy and security administration expert, as well as security practitioner. Ambassador, thank you very much as always for availing yourself, and we do appreciate you very much for stopping by this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Right. First and foremost, what do you make of this development about the release of Bazoum's wife and son?
Well, first, it's a breaking of the ice and a step forward, a positive step forward, and an indicator also of what to expect within the sub-region, not just for Niger, but largely for West Africa, because this has clearly shown that whereas ECOWAS attempted in panic mode the military option, that has been substituted with higher diplomacy, which is already yielding fruits. And we can see now that while talking in hushed tones or behind the scene, there could be more productive outputs than the posturing of military action, threats, and the rest of them. We did say here some times ago that you cannot put a country under sanction and still be talking to that country easily and expect results to be available. We've also said the crippling sanctions usually don't work against the government, so to say, but more hurting the general public. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, ECOWAS has gone back to the drawing board and now done what we can say appropriate by negotiating through proxies or third parties for an ease of this situation in Niger. And now we can see, okay, the son and wife of the ousted president has been released provisionally. We need to underscore that. Provisionally, in the sense that this proviso means there are conditions
attached to the release.
Yes, the release is strictly based on what the tribunal, the military tribunal in Niamey, agreed to say, okay, provisionally we release you to ECOWAS through the Republic of Togo on conditions which are not made public, which might include restricted movements within that country, restricted access or no access at all to media, and some other obligations that these individuals are expected to observe, which will include being made available to the country should in case the tribunal or the government requires them to be available.
So what are we to make of this development? Because obviously, on face value, most people thought this is a product of the negotiations with ECOWAS, for instance. But now we also understand that the military junta in Niger Republic has set up its own tribunal and decided on its own findings, okay, we can provisionally release him. Because we do know that the ECOWAS court had already issued out a verdict on the release of the first family in Niger Republic. So what does that tell us about the kind of headway the negotiations are likely witnessing?
Yes. First, let us deal with the ECOWAS court ruling. The ECOWAS court ruling is such that sometimes it has problem of enforceability because the court does not have its own police. The court is not a country, and therefore the jurisdiction covers all the 15 member countries, and you have difficulties when a judgment particularly is against a government.
The sovereign.
It's a sovereign, and therefore it can and also refuse to implement the decisions in full or part. That is where the value of the ECOWAS pronouncement was. It ends there. The government says, okay, we have heard. You took us to court. The court says we should do within 1 month. Tell the court how we intend to do. But for ego of the government at home, they have decided their tribunal now supersedes the ECOWAS decision, ECOWAS court decision. And so you can see that these might be subtle pressures to enable the government at least also do something. And jointly, you will see that going forward, there may be more of these talks behind the scene that will produce more results than the posturing, as we said before, of the use of military or threat or sanctions or the rest of them. Sanctions and threats of military force, I would consider as old-style strategies.
Are they completely out of place? Do we not have any place for them in
well, it might not really be necessary. Absolutely, might not be necessary, because we have said it here. When you talk to a sovereign, there is a level of respect that, whether you like it or not, that sovereign deserves. And that was obviated when you brought in the military chief brass and what have you to say, okay, yes, they are moving into Niger, they are not announcing a date, but they are ready, they are this. You cannot be ready. Invasion should have been an external thing, that is to say, outside of ECOWAS jurisdiction. But when ECOWAS itself is invading a fellow member country, that imposes some other technicalities that are beyond what we can just sit down and say.
All right. One other area I would like us to consider, it's like you said in your opening remarks, that this feels like the breaking of the ice. And you've talked about, you've emphasized so much on diplomacy to the extent that it has to be a give and a take. If what we are saying is a product of some of the pressures that have been exerted underground, what do you take on the ECOWAS side they now need to give to further to further this negotiation and extract more commitment on the part of these people? Because the sanctions have continued. We have not heard any statement with regards to easing some of the sanctions for the benefit of the local citizenry. Okay,
there's a collective image making and loss in this matter. Is a balance. ECOWAS is saying, okay, we probably have put the military force on the back burner. Sanctions remain. However, implementation of the sanctions now begins to be a little loose. No one is enforcing some of those sanctions as they were envisaged. That's one way that is going. Two, the military is saying, okay, we can talk to some people, but certainly not others. Because there are some other people that they consider or perceive as unfriendly to the regime. And so they wouldn't want to talk to those people. So the selection of who and who were to talk to the regime was very important. And in this case, Togo and Sierra Leone, the military said, okay, we don't have any problem with this. We can talk to them, and which produced part of this result. Now, going forward means the regime expects that ECOWAS will continue to mount pressure on a transition timetable. They have given 3 years. These 3 years is usually very tricky. You agree on 3 years, the regime might go back and review or transmute itself into a political setting and an interested party to contest the election.
Something like we've seen in Egypt, for instance.
Precisely. Right. So now, that is something that ECOWAS has to be considering as it negotiates further with the regime. Two, releasing the ousted president is equally tricky in the sense that when you release the former president to a third country based on perceptions, obligations, rights, and privileges, the regime will be uncomfortable because anything can happen as soon as he leaves the space of Niger. And particularly when ECOWAS is still drumming that he needs to be reinstated. That is one area ECOWAS needs to withdraw, if we must be honest.
Do you think it should be negotiable whether or not Bazoum is reinstated?
No, the question of reinstatement should actually be taken off.
Off the table?
Yes, off the table.
It means that the military junta has won?
No. The military junta has won because even as is today, it has won. It's in government, it's the sovereign. The only
but we
thing
understand its popularity is waning because of the sanctions.
No, the sanctions will be there, yes. We said it here before, and I want to reiterate. Sanctions might bite from the beginning, but after some time, sanctions too will expire. People will get around it. Sanctions will be busted, and people will get used to some of these new realities on ground and begin to live as if there was no sanctions at all. It has happened in so many countries. And when the government gets around the sanctions, it becomes even much more difficult now talking to the people, to the government.
Right.
Good.
Okay. And in talking about ECOWAS, for instance, we understand that Togo, for instance, spearheaded this particular release, and you did talk about how the military leadership sees other countries as not being friendly to them, so they do not want to talk to them. What does this mean for the negotiation process itself? If ECOWAS channels are being sidelined and then they're using this under-the-table approach or back channels to now negotiate, what does this say about the effectiveness of ECOWAS as a bloc?
This negotiation between the junta and Togo and Sierra Leone does not mean entirely ECOWAS was out of it. Nigeria still chairs the commission, and so the other organs of the community are still run by leadership of Nigeria, for instance. The foreign minister, Nigeria's foreign minister, is still heading the Mediation and Security Council, and it was through the auspices of this setting that Togo and Sierra Leone were selected to go. But like I said, the two countries were acceptable to the junta. Now, it's just like posting an ambassador to a country. First, the country needs to accept that ambassador. When you say, we have designated XYZ as our new ambassador to your country, the country too has to reciprocate by saying, yes, we accept this. And based on that, so you see, the acceptance of Togo and Sierra Leone is key to so many things because of the perception of being friendly to the regime in one way or the other. And going forward, we will need to keep this on because now the question of return of Bazoum to power is going to be the most difficult angle to look at.
Okay, when you say that, what comes to my mind is, in insisting on this, I'm talking about the ECOWAS side, are we taking into account what the feelers are, the local, the feelers right there in Niger with regards to what the disposition of the people is to having Bazoum return or not? Because we seem to, or rather, the ECOWAS seem to be insisting on what they feel is legal and constitutional against what is popular with the people. If Bazoum in reality has lost touch with his people and the people would rather he moves on, does it matter how that transition happens? Why should we continue to insist on something that is not popular with the people?
Well, it will be strictly legal to say by the legal text there shall be no coup. And when and if one occurs, it shall not be recognized. So you could say ECOWAS is playing by the rules. However, how practical this is another matter on its own. Because like we said, once a sovereign has been established, it becomes difficult. Power might not be handed over peacefully, usually. Good. Now, even when people go through the ballot to be elected, you see that the rigors of electioneering and voting and the actual elections means a lot before power is accessed. So in this case, when power is accessed through the gun, taking away that same power becomes something quite difficult. And that's why I have insisted. Expecting to reinstate Bazoum seems one of the most difficult things ECOWAS is trying to do. And for practical purposes, if he was so good, he wouldn't have been removed, and the euphoria that followed the removal
would not have happened.
Yes.
Right. And in talking about this, predicament that looks really complicated, give us a sense of how these negotiations are usually unpacked, for instance, especially when you say, the military leadership is not open to talking to certain people. So many times over the course of last year that they've turned back some delegations that they're not interested in talking to. Now that it appears that the temperature has been lowered significantly, we expect that the conversations will be a lot more logical. What is your sense of how this is going to go and how much longer it's likely going to be? Because on this side of the border, we also have concerns around the impact of those sanctions on local communities, on commerce and industry, on importation that is usually, part of the relationship between Nigeria and Niger.
Well, as for the border management impacts on both countries, and in fact much more, because a lot of the products that we see coming across the borders are not necessarily from Niger to Nigeria or Nigeria to Niger alone. It's a trans-West African kind of trade. So surely it has impacted negatively on trade and relationships, social exchanges between even peoples. The sanctions, like we have said, at the governmental level, it might look okay, but at people level, it's usually more painful for persons who have no business with what is even going on to be the ones bearing the brunt. And if the essence of governance is to make life easier for people, then you will see that these sanctions are like a self-inflicted pain. ECOWAS as a body shouldn't necessarily be looking towards only sanctions and the rest of them. These diplomatic moves behind the scene, like we said, produces more results, positive results, than all that you see through the media.
All the posturing.
Yes, of course, all this posturing will only maybe enhance image, but socially is of no value in a way. And so the regime needs to be treated in such a way that they should be assured that we are not necessarily an enemy to you as ECOWAS, irrespective of the rules that have been broken. Because it's a reality now. It's not something that is about to happen. It's something that has happened and is already ongoing. Can you just undo something suddenly? The answer is no. If you do, definitely there must be an impact, because now, if you remove Bazoum, you are also going to effect another coup against the military itself. It doesn't matter. It can be a democratic coup, it can be a military coup. So whichever way it is, now that you have a government that is sitting, a government that has powers and can enforce and is running the country, it is going to be very difficult if you don't assure this government that, okay, we seem to be in a position that we need to accept that something has happened.
Do you see a normalization of this situation, especially with Guinea, with Mali, and all the other countries? Do you see a regularization of the processes, so much so that ECOWAS doesn't see this as a threat anymore? Because at one point they think democracy is under attack from the multiple coups that we've seen over the course of the last 3 years, for instance.
Well, ECOWAS needs to be extremely careful, because if you lose membership rather on every quarter, you have a new coup setting, and then the new coup brings about suspension of the country, imposition of sanctions, etc., etc. And then, in essence, it means if the trend were to continue, don't forget we just had one in Sierra Leone. Now, if that coup had succeeded, it means ECOWAS would have lost another one, which will be counting, and we might reach a point where ECOWAS cannot even form a quorum. That's the danger. We'll reach a point where ECOWAS cannot form a quorum, technically meaning ECOWAS itself ceases to be, because you cannot make any decision, except you go back and change the treaty that says a quorum of 7 members must be seated for any decision to have legal bind. So, assuming Sierra Leone succeeded, the coup in Sierra Leone succeeded, and certainly some other countries have been showing indices of possibility of the same thing. If that were to happen, you would possibly wake up one morning and find an organization that has become empty. Now, if that happens, it will be more disastrous to start looking for members to come back. On what platform? On what circumstances? And would you now be swallowing your words? Therefore, it is pertinent that at this stage, there should be proactive diplomacy to prevent some of these things from happening. Senegal has been boiling, let us not forget. And as the elections come closer, there are more issues in Senegal than we expect, because it will be difficult for you to arbitrarily remove the electoral umpire, ban opposition parties, and take some undemocratic steps and actions, and you still expect a decent election to bring in a new government. These are issues that are very critical for ECOWAS' existence.
At the onset of this whole crisis, we saw a regular interest, if you like, from the United States, talking to our president over what expectations they have. But as it progressed, that communication line seemed to have worn out. The junta also seemed to have severed communications with the French. And I'm wondering, have they basically left this burden for Nigeria to carry wholesomely? What's the international community doing? What interest, what other alternative are they bringing to the table as far as these conversations are concerned?
Well, thank God for a new reality in Africa, let me say, and particularly starting with West Africa. France surely is losing grip of the situation, as it were, and it will only continue because people have now seen that, after all, these countries can actually survive without France. It's very, very key. And importantly, too, America's intervention in the sub-region is coming to question. Because when you say you are here to provide security and assurances of good what have you, and it turns out to be the opposite. Because with the military bases present in West Africa, coups are still happening, insurgencies of all descriptions are still effective and active, then the question will be, why do you have these military bases? Right. So even America itself is being challenged that perhaps the presence in Africa as a whole, the African High Command structure, is questionable. Do we really need it? The answer is no.
All right. Okay. For want of time, we're going to have to anchor the conversation here for now. I'm sure for a lot of people, there are a lot more developments in the weeks and months to come to see who blinks first. If this is a staring contest, a lot of people would love to see who blinks first, ECOWAS or the Niger military leadership. But thank you most kindly, Ambassador Haruna Warkani. Thank you very much for your insight and for the analysis. Really appreciate you for stopping by on Daybreak.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, this is where we end the first conversation. We take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take you through the front pages of some select national dailies to bring you up to speed with the stories making the headlines. Newspaper review is coming up next.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and we will dive straight into the issues that made it to the front page of select national newspapers this morning. We'll begin with the Daily Trust. And the major story here is staying with the EFCC probe on the Ministry of Humanitarian. Edu Gates, that's a new one. EFCC greets Zenith, Jais, Providence Bank's CEO. It is a routine invitation, says bank officials. PDP demands suspension of Tunji Ojo over 438 million naira contract.
Do you think it's routine?
Routine to the extent that every time
it's quite a coincidence if they're being invited in the middle of all of this mess.
Yeah, the idea is these transactions are not possible without the banks. The question is,
and I think for long the banks have really gone under the radar of some of these investigations because they aid and abet in some cases.
The question,
not saying that they're guilty already, but you can't do this without the banks.
Yeah. The question other people will ask, however, it's that if you basically have an account with me and it's meant to facilitate movements of funds, at what point does the bank wake up to say you can't move this fund, especially coming from a minister? Yes. That would be a hard nut to crack. Moving on to other stories, tension in Plateau as Supreme Court reserves judgment on governorship dispute. I'm not sure it's just Plateau. I think it's Nasarawa.
This week,
Kano,
it's Kano also. Yeah.
Nasarawa. And these are very tight ropes, it could go either way, basically.
Let's hope it goes the right way.
Hopefully.
Whatever that right way is.
What Nigerians are saying essentially is that the ballot should be the beginning
and the end.
To other stories, Nigeria's per capita income to reach pre-pandemic levels in 2025. That is according to the World Bank. And
at least that's good news, right?
Good news. It appears there are some movements, whether they are in the proportions we want or that's a different thing. Bandits place 50 million ransom on kidnapped FCT district head, 5 others. You'll find the details of that story on page 17. And to the second biggest story on the cover this morning, Niger junta releases Bozum's son 167 days after. Coupists need to do more, according to diplomats. We just had a deep insight into that conversation with our guest before this. And to other stories, Agric Ministry not in charge of rice palliative distribution. So who is? Who are we to believe?
So is there a rice palliative?
Some members of the National Assembly are saying they had not received, but we've seen others distributing. So the question is, where did they get there?
It's not far-fetched for me. We did hear the Senate President, whether it's misspeaking or not, allude to something like this after the confirmation, the screening exercise for the ministers, and he had to take back his words and things like that.
Okay, so sending prayers to the mail.
Yes, exactly. So it's not far-fetched.
Are you saying the rice have also been sent to the mails of the Senate? Well, all right. To other stories, 8 motorists killed in Borno landmine explosion. That's a sad one, given the gains that we have made around Borno.
Interestingly, they said the governor used that road just 2 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope his movement had not been leaked. And tinubu orders reduction of officials on FG trip by 60%. Now my question is, what was it? So that we can track what exactly is 60% reduction.
But 60% is significant.
It is.
Yeah, 60% of anything is significant.
But what you cannot count, you can't measure.
Yeah, you can't measure. Yeah.
So if it used to be 100, perhaps we would be able to tell that if it goes beyond 40, that you're not keeping with, whatever that is. And then we have this promotional picture on the front page of the Trade Minister, Governor Abiodun, inaugurates TGI's $130 million. That's over 130 billion naira vegetable oil and cubes factory in Ogun State. That's a big one. At the time when we're looking for all kinds of investments.
It's one of those big economies right next to Lagos.
And doing nothing other than just sitting next to Lagos and benefiting from those things that can't find space in Lagos. I'm very sorry to say I'm not sure they are product of some strategic economic policies. It's just basically nearness to market. I
would be offended by that if I was from Ogun State. That it's just the geography that's to our advantage.
We need to see if there were infrastructures that were attracting people into this place, then we can clearly say the infrastructures are. If you have been to Ogiri, you would weep.
Okay.
And that's it on the front page of the Daily Trust.
Nothing personal against Ogun State,
No,
by
not
the
at
way.
all. I mean, it's a lovely state.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Home to the former president. All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Guardian newspaper for today. Edugate, everybody's captioning it differently. 585 million naira humanitarian scandal. Well, the humanitarian there is
Why
in
does it look
parentheses.
like it's the president that is more distressed than the president? The picture suggests that the president is more distressed.
Is there, but I suppose they're trying to make the connection because he did suspend her. Nigerians want probe expanded to other poverty alleviation schemes. And it's indeed a scheme to a certain extent.
Teachers' money, trader money, whatever money they called it at that time.
The conditional cash transfer, all of that. Tinubu slashes official trip expenses, entourage by 60%, not just for him, his wife, the vice president's wife, and everybody else involved in the federal government, and that's quite commendable. They say it's part of a
Why are we supposed to categorize the vice president's wife and his wife as official trips, though? You see them flying around with the Air Force One, and you wonder.
Yeah, that's true. They're all part of the first family anyway. Nigeria's economy to grow by 3.3% in 2024. 2024, that's good news, especially coming from the World Bank. They haven't given us a good news for quite some time, so we're happy to take that one. Supreme Court reserves judgment in Delta, Plateau, Guba appeals. Army confirms arrest of soldier for insulting Sanwo-Olu. How about this one? I really did like it, especially because it is out of brand for military personnel to speak like that on social media. Listen, there's no way to sugarcoat what that soldier did. If I were a soldier caught in the wrong act, I wouldn't use my profession as an excuse to get out of a jam like that. He shouldn't have said, I'm a soldier, as if almost to say, I'm allowed to do this, or something like that.
I agree with that totally, but I also find fault with the choice of words by the governor. You know, some of them are not good enough to repeat on a national television, but he was basically insulting that guy. You've caught him for wrongdoing, it's fine. You know, but some of the choice of his words are not dignifying of a governor.
I guess he was emotional, and he always looks like an emotional person.
He does look like one.
But anyway, the Chief of Army Staff confirmed the arrest of some of those soldiers that spoke on social media against what Governor Sanwo-Olu did when he intercepted those traffic violators. So it's not just a soldier, it was other commercial tricycle riders.
I think there was another one by a Legion member. That's an ex-soldier. I'm not sure who would arrest that one. Who also spoke up against how that soldier was treated.
Well, but anyway, they shouldn't get the pass especially when they violate traffic rules. We're all one and equal under the law. Federal government probes private universities over fake degrees. That is following the inauguration of that committee by the Ministry of Education. Niger school leaders free President Bazoum's son and wife. Why is the wife not in that mix? Federal government's pledge to end insecurity yet again. And we still have that picture from Ogun State regarding some economic activities in that state. So that's it on the front page of the Guardian newspaper for today.
All right, we'll move on to Daily Sun. And the Daily Sun is staying with the probe. It says Degree Bazaar. FJ probes private universities. Others. Who are the others? Inaugurates 6-man investigative panel. Vows not to spare culprit. It will be nice to see how all of this ends. To other story, this one beside the name Max Tinubu slashes international domestic travel delegation by 60%. To other stories, court declares Anyanwu as PDP National Secretary. Supreme Court reserves judgment in Mafuang Omoagege Bagi. Kalu drums support for Tinubu, donates security vans to police. Fabura promises to continue with Wike's Eche Igbodo Road project. Is it Wike's or River State's project? Well,
what's that?
Fabura promising to continue with the ex-governor's project. That's basically every project by the ex-governor it's the state's project. It's this whole idea of linking projects to the governors or to people in power, defeats the purpose for this project?
I think while the governor is doing this, Governor Fubara is doing this unity tour, because you get a sense he's trying to bring the state back together. And every opportunity he gets to speak, he wants to unite River State. And I think that's his prerogative at the moment. So he wants to link it to Wike, so Wike's people understand that, listen, we're not fighting anymore. I'm going to even continue your
legacy
the legacy projects of the past administration. So I think he's trying to, extend an olive branch, so to say.
Oh, I hope so. Don't listen to sycophants. Reconcile with Wike. Boil off, tells Fabura. Tiwa Savage petitions police, says the video should be held responsible if anything happens to her. I don't get this.
Yeah, it just blindsided me that apparently she's friends with his ex girlfriend, who happens to also be his the mother of his daughter. And apparently he's not happy with the fact that I think it's all a mix-up situation. So he was going back and forth with her ex, boyfriend or partner, who happens to be the father of her son, and she finally petitioned, said, I think she was threatened in a way. So it's quite unbecoming of people that society look up to in that way.
Interesting. AFCC quizzes detains Beto Edu. Her suspension not enough. This is coming from Atiku. And gunman kills traditional chief in Ogun. Another sad development there from another part of the country. That's it on the front page of the Daily Sun.
All right, before we discuss any of the stories, let's finally take a look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper for today. Leadership newspaper for today. All right, 2023, Supreme Court reserves judgment in Delta Plateau State appeals. Boko Haram burns 6 to death. My goodness. Maims 4 in Borno.
That's outside the explosive.
Yeah, and that's a very disturbing development. World Bank projects Nigeria's growth at 3.3% in 2024. Better Edu, Zenith Bank clarifies EFCC invite. Cost of governance, Tinubu cuts travel delegation by 60%. There's a lot more from that. And in other news, Shetima tasks Benue leaders on unity and governance. Nasarawa records 75 kidnapped, 83 robbery cases in 1 year. And that just gives you a scale of the insecurity that this state, like many other states, is dealing with. Synagogue Church tackles BBC over documentary. Listen, I'm all for all these investigative pieces, but I don't know, when someone is dead, it's just important for me to speak about it, not to minimize the impact of the documentary or anything.
Yeah,
but it's been 3 years.
I've had to ask myself the same question, and the question for me was, to what end?
Yeah.
And where is the balance?
Exactly.
However,
if someone is not here to defend himself, I think it's really futile. I mean, we can all hate Hitler for what he has done and all the other bad eggs in the past, and not presuming anything guilty about the most revered TB Joshua. But then again, he's not here to defend it.
And the other part, it's the fact that most of the voices on those investigations have actually left the church. So you wonder whether they have an axe to grind with that institution. But like you said, that is not to suggest that the BBC did not do a good job. I think it's a moral question about whether or not we needed to go on with that, considering that the principal suspect in this case, or character in this case, has transited to the great beyond. 3 years now, right? Yes. It was almost 3 years. Twilight of the COVID-19 incident. We now have in the studio to provide perspective to some of the stories that we have reviewed, the former director of news, Voice of Nigeria, Mr. Ben Shaman. Mr. Ben, good morning. I thought to solidarize with
Was
the
there a memo that I didn't get?
I'm not sure.
It looks like you two are in sync with the caps.
Well, I wanted
Although that is from Benue, I can tell. This I don't know.
This is Benue too.
Oh,
this is
Benue.
Doma.
Okay.
Yes,
This is Tiff.
This is Tiff.
Okay.
So you ought to have the unity cup of Benue. The Igede, Doma.
I wasn't in on the memo. That's why.
All right. Interesting. It's good that you're solidarizing with. I mean, it's good to show that solidarity. with the Benue people. They need all of the solidarity they can get at this time.
In fact, everywhere.
Well, everywhere. The Vice President was there yesterday, and it was good to also see him at dawn, the popular black and white. And that was the motivation for me this morning. This morning. Welcome again. It's good to have you join us in this new year. We'll begin with what appears to be on every front page this morning, and that's the Edu Gate. I'm not sure whether it's just the Edu Gate or we have to put the Sadia.
I think it's the humanitarian affairs saga now.
Or the humanitarian gate.
You call them the many gates.
All right. Yesterday was the turn of bank CEOs, and it doesn't appear like we have seen the last of this. It's like every day they spill. We get to invite more people. But what's important for me is, what do you make of all of the revelations that we have seen coming out of the humanitarian agency? It does appear that from the word go, that place was set up for sleaze. What's your perspective?
Now, before I reach to that level, let us look at why was it that the place was rather asleep. When you're talking of Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, they ought to have been unraveling many of these things. Some humongous amounts are coming in. They are going out. And nobody is saying anything in big chunk. What is their job? What is their mandate? Theirs is to alert the EFCC that this is what is happening.
By estimation, you are saying this is already a failure.
Honestly, they ought to have. However, now that we are seeing it today, it should be a continuous thing. Whether the banks are saying it's just a mere handshake. Well, did you go there voluntarily? If you were summoned and you went, something went wrong. And if better edu, some will say better education. If you had to receive that money, wait, how many are we in Nigeria? Some, how many millions?
200 plus.
220. Now we're having 585 million, 0.1 something. You are shipping to go and give the vulnerable as palliative. Each person will take 20,000 naira. I don't understand the arithmetic. Now, if you were to share this 585 million to Nigerians who are 200 and something, how much will one Nigeria go home with?
I think from the documents we've seen, it was just targeted at, I think, three or four states.
Akwa Ibom, Lagos, Ogun State.
Right.
Yes. Then Cross Rivers, four. Now, if that was meant for just those states, if you were able to give them the money, just cash take, how much would one person go home with? I think there is big deceit that, like the president is saying, EFCC, look, do a holistic kind of investigation of this palliative ministry. We cannot have a situation where some people will say, look, during COVID-19, students were not in school. You said you were feeding them. Okay, they were at home. You said you were taking the money and taking palliatives to various homes. Where was that? Today, I hope somebody will not say, okay, we usually provide every time people go to their houses to sleep, so that you now catch them at home. It's such a situation that it's becoming so much a laughable thing that this is what is happening in Nigeria. I think it shouldn't be. And for the banks, why is it that they will always not report these things? If money is being given to you to keep, it is given to you in trust.
But I think we need to clear this. I think they told us that once you do a transaction beyond 2 million, it automatically flags off.
Yeah, the EFCC, just like what you have with the IRS. Yes.
Well, you see, wait, these laws are just there. They are supposed to be implemented. If you want to catch, to escape with some drugs at the airport, the point the candidate is supposed to pass, or the carrier is supposed to pass, and you switch off the machine and it passes, it's human. If you say, okay, we're going to use the sniffer dogs, now that guy in so cap is coming, Can you see him? Okay, can you take that dog away? Take him to the opposite direction. And then the guy comes and passes. So, yes, if you go to the bank, they say, if our EFCC is warning that if you are withdrawing this, we're going to take your report to EFCC. If you are depositing this, you are depositing this, we're going to also do same. But what has happened that this kind of money, Sadia, we're talking about how much? 3.7 billion?
37 billion.
37 billion.
Anyway, at this point, they're just allegations, right? And we're supposed to work with the principle that they're innocent until they're proven guilty, right? But what does this signpost? As Sunday said, I mean, it looks like the ministry was set up from the first point to be like a cash cow where, you know, it's been looted every year, you know, when there's a budget for it, because there's always going to be a need to take care of Nigerians on this humanitarian level. But what is your takeaway from the president's reaction to this development? Because for the most part, I mean, the last time someone this high-ranking was in a mess recently was, I think, the Babachir you know, situation with the grass cutting, for instance.
And that took forever.
And it took a while. In fact, it took the absence of the president for him to be suspended from office, and then thereafter, you know, he was eventually moved and things like that. Do you think that, you know, we've seen some good enough signs that suggest that justice will be done, whether it's to find them guilty or to find them innocent, as the case may be? Now,
you see, some Nigerians have already started comparing Tinubu and Buhari when it comes to the fight, and rightly so, as you're saying. Now, when Buhari came, he said, if we don't fight corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. Now, Tinubu came in, you realize that some media organizations were accusing him. This man is not talking about fighting corruption at all. Now, maybe he wants to do the work. Let me fight it rather than talk about it. And that is why you're seeing people so close to him. And now they're saying the Minister of Interior, the company was a kind of...
it
was fingered, exactly. And the guy came in to say, okay, yes, I was the director in the company. It's run by my wife. I know that. Now, when it comes to what is called politically exposed persons, it is a serious matter politically. It's a serious matter handling public funds. And, of course, you've thrown the ring, your heart in the ring, as it's always said. The moment you are there, people will scrutinize you. So the steps taken by the president, they are, in fact, laudable. They are good. They signpost the fact that Nigeria can go in and fight corruption. And we are also saying that when I say we, I mean Nigerians who indeed love the fight against corruption. We love the fact that he is looking inwards first. They are members of his cabinet, and therefore it does not matter whose cow is God. I mean, it does not matter who is in charge. It does not matter who is very close to. Have you done it? Did you plan to do it? Were there connivance? Was there a kind of some people trying to come together to seize money that belongs to the public? So these are things the panel will look out for. When the Minister of Information actually came out and said this was going to be looked at by the president holistically, some people just said, no, it's the usual statement by by ministers of information as usual. But within how many hours the president came in with his hammer, suspend her, investigate this, EFCC, take over, and EFCC is doing its job. Okay. And now we're seeing these bank executives going in. It also gives the banks the idea that, look, this money we are holding in custody on behalf of government, on behalf of depositors, something can happen, and as already they have been invited. They should not treat it with some kid gloves and say, no, it was just a routine visit. Have you been going for that kind of routine visit?
Okay. Switching gears now, let's talk about that cut, that 60% cut of the president's entourage, the vice president's entourage, the wife of the president. And basically, the president is saying, listen, I've listened to Nigerians. They want to see us also make sacrifices. What are your thoughts about that? Good enough, 60%? Of something we don't know. Anyway, we don't know what the number is, but we know it was surely large.
For him to have started again, it is still part of this corruption. You know, corruption is not just about stealing money. There was a time we were hearing that time that each time a president that time was to travel, some people seized the opportunity, get passports of various friends, and they put them as members of the entourage of the president, all for them, so that they would just get a visa easily. So we were hearing all of this. Now, if we are saying, or we are hearing that the president is saying, look, we've reduced all of this by 60%, I mean, let's start somewhere. Not to start at all is the problem. So it could be a drop in the ocean, but somewhere along the line,
it's a drop nonetheless.
You know, I mean, they said a journey of 1 million miles must start with a step. So I mean, I started with a step from my house to come in here. If I just say, oh, there is still time, okay, there's still time, and I don't come. So it's good a thing that the president has started, and the momentum should be there. All the agencies that are there should just assist the president. When Buhari came into power, people said, oh boy, remembering war against indiscipline. Why? Against that time when he was a military head of state. This man is coming, Nigeria will be good. People sat and were waiting to see direction. They didn't see any direction. And that's why some people would just go hire aeroplanes, paint them, land them in Nigeria, they get the usual bath with a shower, and they disappear. And you get all sorts of corruption. I mean, look at the story of this Sadia, of a woman when she was minister. I mean, all sorts of complaints. And nobody was called to account for anything.
All right.
So if the president has started, it's good omen.
Yes, we are going to be keeping tabs. It's not enough to make this policy pronouncement. We want to see them reflect. And I'm sure it will not be too long until the president sets sail on another journey. And perhaps from the optics, we'll be able to tell how big or small this 60% cut would appear to be. Moving on to other stories, we saw, or rather, we have been witness to claims and counterclaims about the president releasing a huge amount of money to the National Assembly as palliatives for their constituencies. Some have shared. Some are claiming ignorance of that directive. The president's men insist that actually these provisions have been made. The Agric Ministry is saying we are not in charge of any rice palliative. Who are we to believe?
Well, we are supposed to believe those who are honest. But so far, it's like honesty has traveled a bit. Why is it so? If someone came out and said, look, these are two trailer loads of rice the president has given to each lawmaker at the House of Reps. My constituents, this is what belongs to you. And he was doing with pride, not knowing that it's going to be injurious to some people. Some people are now saying, no, okay, I've not received is different from it's a lie. So it means yours is probably coming, all the same. And if the House of Reps members will get maybe 2 trailers, maybe senators will get 3 trailers. You know, they claim they are senior members of the National Assembly. Exactly, even though they are few.
Keyword,
but in all of them,
keyword maybe. Keyword.
You know? Now, but when you even look at it, the budget itself of the National Assembly, was it Daily Trust that did some analysis and said what the National Assembly would take as lawmakers, House of Reps, Senate, combine them, then the workers. You now compare that with how many universities we have in this country.
Okay.
The figure has just, it's just no comparison.
Okay.
That of the National Assembly is so high, then you look at the universities, the university community. Virtually one university, let's say like ABU, is more than the population of the National Assembly, the lawmakers and the workers.
Maybe the students and the lecturers were not voted in.
Exactly. But anyway, we get the point, and the gist of it all is that there needs to be equity in terms of distributing the limited resources we have to attend to all of these myriads of challenges facing Nigeria and indeed Nigerians. But unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it here for now, Mr. Benjamin. Thank you so much, as always, for your insight, the analogies. Really appreciate them, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me as well. always.
solidarity as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Benue, food
I see
basket of the
that
nation.
has resonated well with Sunday Michael this morning. Okay, we'll take a quick break. Coming up next, we talk to a lawmaker from the National Assembly regarding some of the current predicament that most Nigerians are facing in light of the current economic climate. More on that conversation after the break. All right, welcome back to the program. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Now, let's segue the conversation into developments in the National Assembly and how Nigerians want to connect the dots to understand how their lawmakers are being a part of the solution to the myriad of challenges, especially looking at the current economic climate where Nigerians are having to deal with not just the impact of subsidy removal, but also the current economic realities in the world where Nigerians are barely making ends meet. The National Assembly recently passed the budget for 2024, the appropriations bill for 2024, after which President Tinubu signed it into law. Well, joining us on the program is first-time senator who is going to provide us with some insight as to how the lawmakers are in tune with the realities that Nigerians are faced with. Joining us on the program is Reverend Senator Amos Yohana, Senator representing Adamawa Northern Senatorial District at the National Assembly, and is also the Deputy Chair of the Senate Committee on Niger Delta Affairs. Reverend Senator, thank you very much for joining us in the program. It's good to have you join us in the program.
I was tempted to say we begin with an opening prayer. But
exactly.
That cap is
not unusual. Yeah, not unusual though to have a man of the clergy in the National Assembly. For most Nigerians, I guess it sanitizes the quality of the leadership that we expect to see.
There are quite a number of them in this dispensation.
Yes, exactly. But let's get your initial thoughts on, you know, what you make of the commentary that Nigerians feel like their leaders are not necessarily in tune with what they're experiencing, what they're going through, especially regarding the current economic climate since the commencement of this new administration. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that conception can actually just happen because if there is a disconnect between the people and their representatives. And it can also happen when people think the people in government, people in the leadership, people in the National Assembly are not part of the society. That kind of thought can come up. But if people come to grips with the fact that the representatives of the people, either in the reps or in the Senate, and that's why I want to confine myself, part of the society. They do not come from anywhere else. They come from among the society. It's the society that decided that from among us we choose some people to lead us, to represent us, and carry our aspirations, our dreams, and our concerns to the fore. Then that kind of thought will not arise.
Okay.
So, because what I'm trying to say is we are part of the society. We are there. We are not dropped from the sky. We're part of the society. Whatever goes on in the society is what we go through as well. So we are in tune. We know that this is what the society is going through because we are the society.
Okay, it is one thing to know, just to jump in there, Senator, it is one thing to know, but another part of that equation is there is, for some Nigerians, they feel like their leaders don't care enough, and that's why the problems persist. Do you think there's enough care to solve the problem, especially as a lawmaker? Is there that political willingness to address the concerns of Nigerians about
Definitely, otherwise you will not aspire to represent your people. If you truly aspire to lead your people, then it should come from that hunger, that thirst to make life better for the people you are representing. And that's why I say we should guard against the disconnect that people try to create between them and their representatives. They are actually a whole. And what the representatives are elected to do is to represent these people, and the representation is a holistic one. You look at what will help the life of the people. You look at what is it that when government reaches out to them with will make their lives better. They will be able to live their lives more comfortably. What are the needs of the society? And because these lawmakers, these representatives come from that society, they should be in a position, and they are in a position, to say this is what we think our people desire.
All right, distinguished. This question has two strings for me.
Yeah.
One, you've been there for a couple of months. Do you get a sense that the people do not adequately understand what representation means at the level of the National Assembly, whether it's the House of Rep or the Senate? Because we've had your contemporaries complain about how people come to them making demands that ordinarily should be directed at the executives rather than the legislature and all of. Do you get a sense that people seem to misplace what these representations are when it comes to the people you represent? And two, and this is coming from your side, you've also interacted with other people. What kind of, what sense of, what do you think is regarded as a sense of representation? Is it when you argue for what goes to your local constituency, or when you argue holistically for what benefits the average Nigerian? Because it's always a fight about what you attract back home rather than what we can do on a collective to make the entire country better.
Well, on the first one, there's definitely a misunderstanding on the role of the legislature, generally, across board. Many people just elect, they see their people in the Senate or Reps to people who go and dig wells for them, do roads for them, put lights for them, build schools for them, and the rest of it, which are basically the responsibility of the executive. Now, they are intertwined. The legislature does the budget, does the laws. And in doing the budget, they work with the proposals that come from the executive. And the legislature now says, okay, they scrutinize the budget and they tailor it to the needs that come from the people. But the execution, the building of schools and the rest of it is not actually the work of the legislature. Ours is to make sure that the budget is passed and to also oversight, to ensure that what is in the budget is implemented according to the letters of the Appropriation Act as signed by the President. So that is one misunderstanding. The other one is a whole societal issue. That once you go to the National Assembly, people think everything that has to do with their lives must come from you. You will get 100 calls a day, and 95 of them will be talking about my son who needs to go to school, there's no school fees, yesterday I didn't eat, my wife just gave birth to a baby, there is a naming ceremony, or there is a bereavement, and all kinds of things, and all through just demands, demands, and demands. It's not totally misplaced. If somebody has a little bit more of advantage, should be in a position to assist and help his people. You don't need to be even in the legislature to do that. I have done that as a pastor. I have seen people come to me in the night with their little balls to seek for grain and for whatever to go and feed their family. So they didn't elect me. I was just a pastor in the community, and I was reaching out to those needs. But when it goes to a level where people think that because you are now a senator or you are in the House of Reps, and so
it should be given.
It should be given that whatever happens in the society, you must give. And some of them are not actually genuine. We are politicians, we see this. Somebody sits under the tree and calls you and tells you that my wife is going into operation room now. And if you will check, it might not really be true. So we go through these things.
Right. But yeah, okay.
But it is not misplaced that people help.
Right. Yeah.
On the other one, on the issue of your second question.
Yes. The issue of representation, whether it's about your local community or
yeah, when you are in the National Assembly, of course, the whole country is represented, either at the federal constituencies or senatorial districts. They are all represented. So if you come together, you are the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So when you do laws, you do it for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But in doing that law for Federal Republic, the confederating units are all represented. So if there is a road to be built, and it's in the budget, is in the northeast, or is in Adamawa North, one senator from Adamawa North cannot pass that. You need the 108 others to be able to pass. So it's a federal government thing. And that's why representation is from those
districts.
And
so why I say this distinguish is to lay precedents for a follow-up question. Sometimes you find an infrastructure that require a block intervention that has the capacity to change the narrative for the country. But the only way to get that infrastructure passed is when you have to provide something similar for another place. So you end up breaking what is a scarce resources into particles because you want to touch everywhere, rather than just take a strategic infrastructure, face it head on, and fix it. For instance, every year in the last 10 years, we have provisioned for Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And rather than complete that road once and for all, we do just a little portion, then take a bit of that fund, throw into something else. That at the end of the day, neither the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway or another strategic road like the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Expressway is completed, because we have taken pieces of those funds and split it around the country in the name of wanting to touch every part of the country.
Well, that's the issue of the complexity of our society. We are a multi-ethnic nation.
But shouldn't you be thinking strategic?
If you say, okay, let's take this year or these 2 years and focus on that, the other people will say they are marginalized.
Right.
So it's a very complex issue. I agree with you that we should do things and complete them so that they are useful. But you cannot say, okay, let's put everything in one place so that we make sure that they are done. Because of our complexity and multiplicity, we have to ensure that every other unit of the federation is taken along.
Right. Okay. Talking about access now. We've seen in other climes, we like to always draw parallels, whether it's with the United States or with the United Kingdom, the colonizer for this country, in terms of the kind of democracy they practice. And we've seen some of their politicians, no matter how high-ranking they are, they're accessible to their constituents. Let's talk about accessibility now. For most Nigerians, when you get to that top level, you stop picking calls, you stop responding, you know, your visits are now ceremonial in such a way that you don't have genuine conversations or interactions with your constituents. Talk to me about what it is like for you and whether that is, you know, the reality that people speak to. And also, for want of time, I want to, compress all the questions in one. Talking about the current dispensation, the 11th, Senate. For most Nigerians, it's the 10th Senate, I beg your pardon. Hopefully, maybe it's a prayer that you're part of the 11th one. That, there's this rubber stamp, perception that Nigerians paint, that everything the president wants, the president gets. That the PDP, even with its numbers, do not put up a good fight to perhaps address some of those concerns around our borrowing patterns and what we need to do to safeguard the future. What can you say about accessibility of lawmakers as a lawmaker, and also the kind of robust conversations you have in the plenary that suggest that, listen, the presidency is not just having its way all the time?
Well, accessibility is something I cannot speak for everybody. I speak for myself. My constituents in the last 2 months have been very, very accessible. In the last 2 months, I have been to my constituency for 3 times. And when I go, I stay at home, I visit. In fact, the last Christmas, I did it in one of the local governments in my constituency. I worshipped and we were along with people. And you take calls. But after having said that, when you are elected, you are not a telephone operator. You need to sit down and do the work you are elected for. So you need to regulate your life to have a balance. That this is the time for meetings and for work for them. You do that. Then when you are out, you go out also and reach out to the people. And I believe many legislatures do that. Otherwise, you cannot be a legislature. The legislature is one organ that stands out as the symbol of democracy. During the military era, the only institution that is absent is the legislature. So if you do away with the legislature, you do away with democracy. So accessibility is part and parcel of the life of a legislature. You are in touch with your people all the time, whether in person or through other means as provided by technology. On the issue of relationship between the executive and the legislature and the executive are not meant to be fighting each other. They are part of one government. It's just that they are separated to ensure checks and balance. You have your responsibility as a parliament to make laws and to oversight to ensure that those laws are implemented. The legislature, the executive is there to execute the projects. So they are not actually meant to fight. The separation is not watertight. Read any book on political science. There is no watertight separation between the executive and the legislature.
All right,
you are meant to work together. It's just the way the heart and the liver and the lungs work.
I like that analogy, distinguish. I will need a yes or no answer for 2 questions before we wrap up. We are completely out of place. Do you have a constituency office? Talking about reach, we would like to know. And 2, have you taken your own delivery of the rice that is claimed to be shared for your constituency? Just a confirmation.
I have a constituency office, so it's a yes. Remember, just 2 months in the legislature, but already we have secured a senatorial district office.
That's right.
And we are working on opening more offices in the other local governments.
Okay.
On the issue of rice, I have not seen any rice. If they will give us rice, maybe they will. But as at the moment, nobody has given me any rice, and I don't think there is any legislature that was given any rice to go and share.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it here for now. Reverend Senator Amos Yohana, thank you most kindly for joining us on Daybreak this morning. Really appreciate your thoughts and your insight on today's talking point. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I think you should do this often, distinguish.
Right. Okay, let's see where this goes then. That's our show for today. Thank you most kindly, as always, for being a part of it. We do appreciate your time and company. Let's do this again. We'll be back tomorrow live at 8 o'clock, exclusive as always on Trust TV. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you for watching.
If you have enjoyed this, tomorrow is another date. Let's do this again. I am Sunday Michael Ogo. Good morning.